Hey, this is Vatsal, founder of Ultra Human.
Hey, this is Mohit, founder of Ultra Human. Super excited to be here.
एक मिनट रुक जाओ, रेडी होने दो. चलो ये कर लेते हैं. This could be a great intro.
Hi, I'm Akshay.
Hi, this is Saurabh, and you are listening to the Founder Thesis podcast. We meet some of the most celebrated startup founders in the country.
And we want to learn how to build a unicorn.
Hyperlocal logistics seems to be the big thing currently, with companies like Zepto raising hundreds of millions of dollars and Blinkit getting acquired by Zomato for $570 million. But much like fashion, the trends in the startup would also repeat themselves, and 2015 was another similar year which saw an explosion of hyperlocal logistics startups. One of the most well-known such startups was a company called Roadrunner, which was later rebranded to just Runnr and was eventually acquired by Zomato in order to help them make a successful pivot from being a restaurant discovery app to a food ordering app. Mohit, Kumar and Vatsal Singhal, the two founders of Runnr, sat down for a candid chat with Akshay Dutt about their journey as startup founders. This conversation is being released in two parts. In the first part, Mohit and Vatsal talk about their journey of building Runnr and getting acquired by Zomato. And in the second part, they talk about their current venture, Ultra Human. Here's Mohit and Vatsal talking about how it all started.
So I joined as a product manager, eventually to head product for Ola for almost a year plus as a head for Ola. And then that's where I actually started thinking about that this is really interesting because in shared economy, if logistics or in transportation, if transportation can make sense, logistics should also make sense. And that was the genesis of the Runnr idea, that can we apply the same dynamics of transportation business optimization to logistics business optimization, right? And you can say that would be the genesis of Runnr.
Like aggregate demand and supply on one platform.
Yes. So just like transportation, you have a fragmentation problem in logistics, which is wherever demand is, you won't have supply, but overall both are inefficient, right? So for example, you need to ship 10 orders, you're in Kodmanga, and then all the supply is in Marazalli, for example, right, in Bangalore. So supply is there, which is free, demand is there, which needs supply, but then these two are not in the same location, right? Similarly, as the taxi problem, Bangalore back then had enough taxis for serving the demand that Bangalore had, because taxi adoption was on the lower side as well in the year 2012, but we didn't have them in the right location, right? So if you need 200 cabs in MG Road around 9 p.m. on a Friday, those cabs would be randomly somewhere. They wouldn't know where the demand is. So same thing in logistics as well, right? So that was the problem that we were set to solve.
And did you want to do for hyperlocal or for what did you see? Did you see this as a for e-commerce deliveries, you'll become a platform to enable that, or what exactly was the segment?
All things last mile. So we believe that last mile is the hardest piece of the puzzle because it affects user experience. So if you look at, because you have a user touch point, right? The delivery boy at the end is actually delivering to the user. In the logistics supply chain, no other node is actually interfacing with the user. So we believe that if we could own the user experience there, we would be a more lucrative partner for anybody, rather, starting with hyperlocal merchants, but eventually large e-commerce players as well, because they would want to complete their last mile as soon as possible. And it's not just about the speed, but also the quality of last mile in terms of the driver should not call multiple times while approaching the address, and basically the payment experience. Back then, not online payments were less than 10% of the overall set. So the COD experience should be good. The cash exchange, or if there is a payment on delivery flow, all of these issues should be seamless. All of these experience touch points should be seamless. So those are the things that we were solving for the SME market and eventually for the e-commerce market as well.
And how did you raise funds immediately? Because Mohit, you had worked in funded startups, so you probably understood that game of fundraise and all that. Or did you want to first build up some sort of an MVP and some traction and then do that? How did you do that? That 0 to 1. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the idea was to actually take off as soon as possible and hyper iterate along the way. And I don't think we ever thought about bootstrapping. The primary reason for that was that if we can find the right a partner who can back our story in the early days, they're as good as a co-founder who's putting money, essentially, right? So that was the thought process that we believed in, and we still believe in that. And because what you're trying to really do is if you're trying to build a business and accelerate and basically get to scale as soon as possible, you're just compressing time in some ways, right? And compressing time would require, in some cases, money or intensity from your end. That's how, and we saw it in a very simple way. We didn't see it in a very complex way. I mean, if we were unable to raise, obviously we would have figured out a different way to bootstrap, but we got traction quite immediately, because in 2015, when we were set out to raise, basically most of internet companies were also starting to raise, and the internet ecosystem was also taking off. If you remember the 2015 rush, right? And the way it happened was that, so we spoke to Bloom first. Bloom was the first ever fund that I spoke to. I remember the name of the person, Adit Parekh. He was telling me, and I had never raised money, so he was telling me that, oh, raising money is cool. You get to build what you want, and you raise a little bit of money and then go for a Series A after 2 years. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Series Seed is when you have an idea. Series A is when you have product market fit, and B is when you need growth capital, right? But then when we raised our seed, we immediately got like 2 offers as a follow-on that, hey, you guys have started growing already. Why don't you raise another $10 million? So that was with Nexus.
Yeah. Okay. How much did you raise in the seed?
So in seed, we raised $1 million, and after 2 months, we raised a 10. Yeah.
Which is phenomenal, even with today's numbers. That is still pretty phenomenal.
Not today's numbers. I mean, I think today's numbers, people raise 10 as seed and then 100 as a Series A. Yeah. So it's just 10x of what it was in 2015. But it was a different business. Like, for the business to take off and to do 1,000 transactions per day, it took us no time, because the need was there. And we had to just make few things easier for our users, merchants, essentially in this case. That everybody wanted a delivery service. Can you do it via an app? That's it, right? And then that's where we started. And then
What kind of merchants? Was it like restaurants or what? Like
restaurants, grocery stores, pharmacy stores, etc. Restaurants were the largest because they valued last mile the most from an experience perspective, because it is a time sensitive category, right? So naturally, when we started selling, restaurants wanted to pick all of it up.
Yeah. And I think the best part of the business was that selling was theoretically easy, because you go to the restaurant and say, okay, there is a service which is no cost, no fixed cost, it's variable. Here you send an order, you get like, you have to pay $50 or whatever, and you get it right out. So I think they understood this business very well, because, they would get orders on the phone and they need to send their boys out, right? Instead of that, they use our service to, send it out. So it was fairly easy to sell it to them that, okay, why this will work. Of course, pricing is another ballgame altogether. They would say, okay, 20 rupees is what I will pay. That's a different thing. But they understood the model very easily.
and how did you get the supply of riders who will do the delivery, and you also making sure the quality is maintained? Because as you said, customer experience is what you're fixing. So how did you do that?
So I was staying in National Games Village back then, if I remember. I think it was in Kodmangla, and what I did was I ordered food from a few places, and the delivery boys who came in, or delivery folks who came in, I started pitching them the model and converted my house as the onboarding place for these delivery folks. That's how it's. And obviously back then we had no people to train, so I used to train them, talk to them, tell them about the model. I used to talk to each one of them individually, telling them that, this is the amount of money you can make, which is fun, because at some point in time, I was speaking to 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 delivery boys per week individually, spending 15, 20 minutes with each. So that gave a lot of context in terms of what are the problems that they face usually. But also just like the taxi market, the transportation market, the delivery market was actually capped. The delivery executive market was capped in terms of earnings. So we have this problem especially in emerging societies, that the labor class never gets to increase their income in a significantly substantial way unless there is an mega event globally, right? So look at the amount of money you pay to your maid, your cook, or your driver. The last 5 years would have gone up to 25, 30, 50, maximum 50% on a low base.
Yeah.
And these folks are also suffering on a low base problem, which was they were making 8,000 rupees to 10,000 rupees for the last 10 years. Same amount. Or maybe from 6,000, 7,000, they moved to 10,000. But the inflation, obviously, or the prices around them were increasing significantly, right? So they wanted a shot at making more money. If they were to be more efficient and put more work effort into it. They wanted a shot at making more money. And that was one thing that we discovered. The other one was they wanted more flexibility also, which was that I can't work for 8 hours a day. I can't work for 6 hours a day. I want to only work for 3 hours a day because I also study as a CAT aspirant. I also study as a BCA student. So how do I like make quick money to fund my education, right? So these are the two core. This was a hypothesis in the early days that this is how we'll crack supply. We will crack part-time supply, and we will give full-time people a shot at making more money. Yeah,
Okay. And it was like a pay per delivery, right? Not like a fixed salary.
that is correct. So for the merchants, you pay per delivery. For delivery folks or executives, we had a combination of a minimum guarantee plus get paid per.
Okay. Well, so some of the Ola learnings you would have applied here in terms of incentivizing them in the right way.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like not a lot of these constructs we were hearing for the first time. We're like, oh, this is how it'll work. He's like, yeah, this works in Ola, and it'll work here. And it was the
Yeah.
same. Like, of course, everyone wants to earn more. That's like the fundamental thesis. But if you as a platform don't give them money, then of course they want some guarantee as well, right? So it was a like a basic thought process construct, right? So now it was our responsibility to sell it to more merchants and get demand, right? And then models, okay, where we kind of can earn money, but yeah, they understood really well. They were like, we are happy. If you give us a minimum guarantee which is higher than what we are earning today, then we are in, and we have a shot at earning more. I think there's nothing like.
Okay. So when did that 10 million round happen? Like which month and year? I think March of 15 is when you started Roadrunner, right?
It happened probably in June or July. Yeah.
And you were like about 1,000 orders a month by that time.
I think that back then would have been like when the round closed, like 3,000 to 4,000 orders a day.
A day.
A day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. This is only in Bangalore.
Yeah. Till Series A, we were only in Bangalore. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's only in Bangalore.
And what did your like app look like? Like you had a separate rider app, and again that the Ola learnings would have come in to play there. Right?
Yeah. You got a separate
was
merchant
an
app, rider app.
But,
Yeah.
but it was of course very like basic and definitely not that's the best of it. But I think like of course 10 million coming in, we knew we have to definitely invest in technology, make it better, add a lot of constructs into it. Like one of the key that theoretically we invested heavily on was the financial construct. See, rider, like the basic problem is the trust, right? And that is one of the key technology problem statement as well, because the constructs were changing. If you ask me, every day, it was such a difficult problem statement because it was dependent on cities as well. Some cities would have something and some localities would have something, right? So it was evolving at a very, very rapid pace, right? And that is something that was a very, very...
I would add to it and say that like I think our driver technology or driver side application was actually a big focus. Probably our driver app was, I think, the most advanced piece in terms of product and in terms of focus. The problems that you face today as a technology company were not the problems that we used to face back then. So what are some of the problems? The drivers didn't have smartphones. They didn't have an active internet connection, right? We're talking about 2015. They would have a GSM phone at best, essentially, right? So how do you build a system where they have an active internet connection? If you rewind a little bit back at Ola, for example, people didn't even have phones, right? So
Ola used to give them phones.
We used to give them phones, and we used to have outages across localities. Like we used to be shut from an internet perspective for hours. Like, oh, this network is down, service is down. You can't do anything, right? You can't really call your POC and say that, oh, why is this service down? So from that to basically service being up, to people owning phones, to people owning internet enabled phones, this is the journey that we lived. And I think we at Runnr, we lived a journey of people not having internet enabled phones to enabling them with internet enabled phones, building an application that they cannot misuse. Sometimes a lot of people would also misuse, which is basically they would use the data up and they'll say that, oh, I'm not getting orders. Because data was not cheap back then. It was pre-Geo era, exactly, right? And you'd have to spend like $1,000 to get access to data. And you'd end up your 1 GB and your 500 MB, and basically you'll say that, oh, I watched all the YouTube, but I could not get any orders. So the responsibility to get people orders is yours. So we had to do, I would say, a shit ton of optimization to make it more battery efficient, data efficient, so that people access the right type of apps. The driver construct for us was probably one of the most advanced pieces because we wanted to drive them to the right demand areas, the right workflow. You should have payment visibility. Whenever you complete an order, you should know how much money you have made. You should have instant settlement. If not a week, then within 3 days, you should get settled. If you're doing multiple orders, you should get paid for, or you should save money on the efficiency as well, whereas we make money. So all of those constructs, you should have surge pricing on the supply side. So if there's a dearth of folks who are working and we can send them a new rate card that if you work for the next 4 hours, you'll probably make double. So those are some of the things that we actually probably built over 2015 and 2016.
Yeah. And back in the day, like, of course, when we launched, if you ask me, there were, like, I think, around 20, 25 companies that came in which were doing exactly the same thing. Like the changes you would make in the product, and there are companies that would copy it. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. So we had this pricing model, which was from 0 to 4.5 kilometers, there is X amount that you would pay, right? And of course you were doing it. So a lot of startups thought, okay, like we had tons of data scientists and it was like a big geek company, right? So everyone thought, they have applied some data science and there's some big algorithm that has found this number as 4.5. And it was, I'm telling you, it's a random number that all of us sat and we're like, okay, what should it be like? Should it be 4? Should it be 5? No, let's do 4.5, right? And we saw every company now it became a trend. Like people used to have 4.5 kilometer as their like a base to say, that's like a first tire, and then next tire at 4.5 to 5.
Yeah. In all honesty, it arrived out of saying that 5 kilometers the mark. Beyond that, people don't want to travel, so we should have a rate for 5 kilometers. But then it does not sound too scientific. Let's make it 4.5 so that it looks like it is precise. And the week after, we saw like a few competitors having a 4.5 rate card. And then I think all the food delivery guys had a 4.5 rate card. I'm like, where is this number coming from? I think maybe they think that we have thought it through, but that's not true. Yeah.
And who were the competitors that time? Like people, I think Shadowfax probably started around that time, I guess. And Grofers, of course, was there.
The consumer side. But yeah, they had shifted to consumer back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were a lot of
So
like
Grofers,
companies that came in, right? One was, I think Opinio was there, and then Quickly, and I don't even know the names of so many. Every city also had their own, like one hyperlocal startup. Like we remember it was around, it had crossed 25 at one point, like people doing exact same thing. But yeah, it was fun.
Okay. So by like 2016, what kind of numbers were you doing? Like monthly order rate? Like 15, you had that, June, you had that 10 million fundraise. So, what's the next milestone? And what kind of monthly order rate were you doing at that next milestone? Like, tell me the milestones in that. Like,
so the next milestone for us was basically to hit the 10,000 orders a day mark, which we had hit in, like, I think right before New Year, 2015. I remember the evening of New Year, which was like the most intense New Year that I've ever had in my life. There was so much of demand from restaurants. Demand was spiking the same day. And obviously the restaurant partners expected us to magically have more people on the ground, but it can't really happen like that, right? Because it's a 2-peak problem. And this dinner peak for New Year was extremely high, right? It was 5x of the volume that we could handle. So we were overflowing with these orders. It was raining. We were on our bikes delivering as well, and a lot of mess ups that day. Yeah. But we had hit the 10,000 mark. That was interesting. Yeah.
And also I think most of us were out delivering because, of course, the quality of service was what we were aiming. Okay, that should be the best. And I think we did these sprints, a lot of these sprints, especially during rains in Bangalore, during early days as well. Even when restaurants are shouting that I have 10 orders, but there are no riders, and all of us would leave our office and we'll go and deliver. But customers would get angry why the food is so late, and they would give us the food, and then what we'll only take that food and eat it.
Yeah, it just mess up on both sides. So you're serving, the restaurant was angry and then the user was angry. But it was fun. I mean, these things shape you.
Yeah, that's like a pretty strong commitment to customer delight, like to actually go out in the rain and do all that.
Yeah, but that is the nature of the industry. Like, hats off to people on the ground. I think both of us, both Vatsal and I, would have probably spent like more than like many days delivering ourselves on the ground, and the amount of riding stress that they go through and uncertainty of income, plus basically you land at the user address and probably sometimes you're not even safe because these are like distributed across. It's insane the amount of risk that people take to live a better quality of life. Yeah.
In fact, like I think the first time that I went, Like we were so frustrated because our app was so bad. Like it would get stuck, which the order is not completing. Or when you are actually so stressed because of traffic and like you're already carrying a heavy order and you don't want any issues to come in, right? And we went out and we were like cursing us like what such a bad product we built. And we used to like feel proud that, oh, we have built something amazing sitting in our AC office, that we are doing a great job. But I think since then, I think what we decided was we'll go out, like made sure that we go out every week, at least, and especially during peak hours, because that is when things break, right? In the sense that, okay, in the middle of traffic, if you're sending someone an order, how will he pick it, right? And how will he complete an order in the middle of the mess that is happening? Of course, internet providers would go down. What should happen at that point? Navigation is a problem. So there are a lot of these things that we actually realized because we were very aggressive in going and delivering. And I think we started also empathizing with everyone. Okay, if it is not working, we can't theoretically shout at them that, okay, why are you late and all of that, right? It's like it's you, when you realize the pain, you'll even feel bad. Okay, if app went down, it's like so much mess that is created on the ground. I think it was a lot of great learning.
So you saw the primary challenge for you as fixing supply. Like you felt that demand was available on tap. If you could fix supply, then demand would flow automatically.
No, I wouldn't say that totally. I mean, this was a new product that the market was using as well, right? So we could have acquired an entire account, for example. We could have said that, oh, this restaurant chain, let's acquire it completely. But we can't acquire demand at the pace at which we want, because the supply has to match up, and not just for base hours, but also for peak hours, right? So that was one. The other thing was the gestation period of restaurants trying out the new process and understanding that, oh, by the way, delivery was a new business in 2015, right? So restaurants also did not understand concepts like returns in food, right? So they were like, oh, I get like 5 orders a day, 10 orders a day. If a user returns my order, why should I refund their money, right? I don't have a brand to protect, right? Very few brand conscious folks would do that, but somebody who's getting a call and is not on Zomato, not on Swiggy, does not have a rating problem back then. I mean, they don't have a rating basically, so there is no brand issue. They would just say that I don't care about this user, right? I just want to care about this 500 rupee order, right? So those constructs were not clear. In fact, when we used to sell to our merchants, they would say that, oh, if there's a refund, you guys have to pay. And we were like, if there's a refund because of food, why should we pay? And they would not get it. And they would say that, oh, my food can never be bad. So it's just a delivery. This tussle, and the customer SLAs were not fixed. That's why it was a very hard industry to build in, right? You have to be on your toes. You have to, I think the issue was all of these unknown policies, which the food aggregators have set right now. Like right now, that a return is supposed to happen if for certain type of users, and a delivery, if it is delayed above a certain level, what is the process? That's what we actually built at Zomato for 3 years after Runnr, essentially, because we understood what the problem of a last mile company could be.
So essentially, like there was always that tussle between you and restaurants about things like returns.
And I think it was a combination of all, right? It's like there were like a big piece of it, of course, was fraud, right? Where who is doing a fraud, you would never know. Is it the user, is it the rider, or is it the merchant? And sometimes it's a combination of all three, right? They would merge together and try to create a try to game the system. Okay, I am earning more money, and like free orders are getting created just like that, right? So a lot of course, technology and focus was going into building like a fraud engine as well. How do we identify such riders, such merchants, and block it from the system, right? And all these learnings, of course, went into building like a very, very powerful platform as well.
So when you hit 10,000, it was Bangalore, or you were in other cities also?
So 10,000 would be Bangalore and Bombay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what's the next milestone?
The next milestone for us was to actually hit 20,000 orders, actually double the volume, and raise more capital. It's the year 2017. Yes.
How much did you raise?
So we set out to raise north of $10 million, like 12 or 15. I think we raised $7 million. The reason for that, multiple reasons, right? So one is that by 2017, we were not able to display economics in the food delivery business. Like we were showing downtrending cost and uptrending revenue, that was there. But then we had issues like collection issues. For example, some of the restaurants were in postpaid, so they would not pay. Like they would pay a lower amount. And we didn't realize this could actually be a big problem, right? The other thing was basically the margins, right? In terms of the margins, we did make a lot of progress, but I think we still had a lot of headroom to make progress. Like we're still losing $15 per order, 15 rupees per order, essentially, is what I remember. So that was a hard. Those were hard economics, and for us to optimize immediately, because you can't really reduce costs because it'll affect driver earnings. You can't really increase revenue because it'll affect revenue retention, essentially, like merchants wouldn't pay. And you had to have a fair policy around pricing as well. You can't really charge people in seclusion. People talk that one merchant will tell to another person. So you have to do a market correction, essentially, right? So we were on this chart, but then we were also in 2017, which was a very hard fundraise market. I think there was sort of like a crash where all the VC funding dried up for almost 12 to 15 months or more. And this was very hard fundraise. Like essentially we were questioned on almost everything we do, right? So we spent hours and hours in optimizing to ensure that like company survives somehow and goes through this. Personally as well, it was a very hard thing because since the beginning, we were like almost on our own savings. And we had sort of thought that post Series B or post Series A, when we started growing, we'll probably start taking salaries. And it did. And when we had hit a snag in terms of growth, it was like a double-edged effect in terms of like us being poor and basically the money also drying out. So you can't take salary for the next 2 years again. And that was like the double whammy in some ways. It was very stressful. 2017 and 2018 early, I mean, potentially 2016 and 17 were, 2016 and 17 were like one of the most stressful phases of the company.
But like that 10 million lasted you for how long? Like that was a pretty significant amount. Like, would you have done things more frugally, like based on power of hindsight? Like,
yeah, I mean, of course, you can connect dots backward and say that for sure. Back then, we were going for the win, which was basically you have one shot at becoming the company to cross 50,000 orders a day milestone. We would have been larger than the most, like we would have probably been one of the largest logistics players in India, and also one of the largest in Asia. I remember speaking to folks, Chinese counterparts, and they were saying that please deploy as much capital as possible, right? Because if you get to market leadership, then you get 100x on your valuation, on your revenue. So not just a 10x or 15x. And that was very lucrative because so why would you get into forming a company and doing something on your own? You want to win, right? You want to again the mindset of exponential progress. So we went all in. We said like we will take a hit in terms of revenue. We will take the hit of cost, and we will win at any cost. Basically, we'll form the brand in front of the merchants. We will ensure that we build the supply. On certain days, we would have hired like more than, you can say, 3,000 to 4,000 people, like just with like basically sheer hustle and the ability to work more hours, right? So that was our, for lack of a better word, that was our drug back then, right? That you want to win, and you want to win at any cost, because you know that once you win, you can optimize everything else. And we had seen this playbook play out with Uber. I had seen this playbook play out with Ola as well to some extent, but sometimes it does not go well. Sometimes it does go well. In our case, it was a combination, I would say. Yeah. So that's what actually happened.
Like, what were the areas where you overspent? Maybe like, was it on, like you were too liberal with your payouts, or was it the overheads, or what was like?
I think if you like, yeah. I think that it's the inefficiency in the system that comes in, not because of the money that you have. It's because of the hyper growth that you want to do, right? Now you could, of course, embed technology in every piece of your system, right? Let's say even driver onboarding for the matter, right? Let's say you have to onboard drivers. Now you could always have a system around it where it's a platform. You enter details and then some confirmation happens, or you could have people, right?
Video-based training.
Yeah, everything. I'm saying now you could have people who are actually physically training people, like taking papers and doing all of that. Now you have to scale that in 15 cities, let's say, right? You could have people there, or you could build a system for it. Now, building system, of course, will take time, but do you have the time, right? So it's always a compromise of hiring versus building technology, right? And building technology, even if you have to do that also you need to hire, right? So you are parallelly building technology, hiring for that, parallelly building and scaling the ops and the groundwork, right? So there's never a right answer for saying that did you do something or were you not frugal. It's always the choice of growth versus being all frugal. So you could choose that. So when the times were different, then we were, of course, absolutely frugal. We made sure everything is on technology, and we in fact broke even as well at at the unit economics level at one stage when we were really cutting cost and making sure that the transactions that we do are making us money.
When did you break even? Like,
I think early 2017, because we had no option. Like, we had to go to the
and
market.
your runway was finishing.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I mean, we had to raise, we needed the money. So we went out to the market with the story that we have grown by 10% in the last 3 months, but then we have turned profitable. So we have cut all the unprofitable and optimized our supply chain, and we are now making money on a contribution margin perspective, right? And I got our burn down to like extreme, like you can say burning less than, I think, $50,000-$60,000 per month. Less than that, actually, running an organization of 10,000 people, basically. So, like, essentially, that was the optimization that we had to do. So, in that journey, I wouldn't change that, because that is where most of the learnings came from, and that was the only thing that, I mean, that did make us survive, right? I mean, there was no other way.
okay. 10,000, how many were like on payroll? Like, a lot of these would be the gig workers, right? Like,
All of them were gig workers. We didn't have anybody on the payroll. Yeah.
but your own team, like the team which does hiring, onboarding, tech, like alliances, that team.
So that would be less than, you can say, 100 people overall. Yeah. Not as lean as we would have wanted again, but the issue was that we should have scaled more linearly and not very, very exponentially. Like, obviously, you have to hire before you can execute sometimes, but then if you build systems, you can bypass that. And sometimes growing really fast, you don't really know, like you don't have the time to build systems. You want to win the market share as much as possible.
And when did the Tiny Owl thing happen?
Tiny Owl thing happened with a $7 million round, where the thought process was basically the fact that this 7 million, along with Tiny Owl getting acquired in the company, will actually help us raise more capital, the capital that we need to scale beyond our current scale, because we are acquiring a consumer asset, and this consumer asset will help us basically create a story, which is that we're now full stack. We're not just limited to, so we control the end user pricing also. We don't need to depend on the merchants for our revenue. We have more revenue levers. That was basically the thing. In hindsight, obviously, that was a mistake, because
Why was it a mistake?
Because we didn't have the money to run a B2C. And if you compare back then, we were doing, let's say, around 15 to 18,000 orders on a stable day in food delivery. Probably Swiggy was 25,000 orders, if I'm not wrong. But we were doing B2B, they were doing consumer. That was the difference. And I think Zomato was early. They hadn't really launched food delivery back then, right? And the reason why we believed we could do a consumer play was because the market was super low, super early, essentially, right? In terms of scale. The reason why we could not do it was because of our stupidity, which was basically we didn't have the money to actually run the business, which was we had the logistics stack, but with $7 million in your bank, and while you're optimizing, we hadn't gotten optimized when we raised the money, right? So we're still optimizing it. We hadn't got into the $50,000 burn rate then. We took 4 months to optimize because we didn't want to do a rapid cut where we fire and lay off everybody and basically business stops making sense. So we did it probably in a gradual way, and that obviously did use up some of our $7 million of capital, and we were left with like $3 to $4 million in the bank, where we didn't have the money to precisely to actually go out and acquire users back then. And I think Swiggy had done a fresh fundraise back then, if I remember, of a $20 million round. Zomato obviously was capitalized very well back then. So since everybody was educating the market, it was very hard to fight the discount war. It was still, I wouldn't say that we couldn't have fought it. We could have fought the war, but I think the reality is that I think the mistake that we made with that acquisition, I mean, this was our own problem that led to the mistake, I think, because we could have just focused on the one side of the business and grown it by the capital that we were raising. That could have been a better way probably, but you still don't know till you are in the same shoes, right? I mean,
And I think
until you are faced with the same scenario, you don't really.
Yeah, and also I think we were anyways big fans of consumer businesses, right? So we thought, okay, we would want to, of course, make it a consumer business given opportunity, but of course the challenges are very different. Acquisition is something that is a primary construct of a consumer business, and we of course underestimated the cost of that. So I think definitely probably didn't work out that well, but yeah.
And what was Tiny Owl's reason to get acquired? They were also like facing that funding crunch. Like
That is correct.
they didn't have it.
They were also hitting a bad fundraise market back then. So that was the major reason that economics were harder for them. Food delivery, they were sort of like the pioneers in the market, if you really think about it, in terms of scaling fast. But they probably, I mean, it's obviously, I don't know the full scenario, but probably they scaled faster than the amount of money that was available to them, right? And if I just fast forward like a few months forward when the funding market was green, everybody just does the same thing. Like basically everybody basically spent more money than anybody else and basically acquired the market. So sometimes timing is probably more important than anything that you can ever do. That was probably one of the biggest learnings.
Was the integration an easy thing to pull off? Like integrating a B2C company with a separate culture and mindset and separate team with a B2B company, which would probably have a separate culture and mindset?
I wouldn't say so because they were also, I mean, to credit to them, they were also very much in the mindset to win, but they were also trying to find the right answer to win back then. And we didn't have a right answer because it was the food delivery business has a mountain of cash to cross, like globally. Like I don't remember or know of any bootstrapped food delivery business in the world, right? Because there is a mountain of cash to cross or a efficient food delivery business in the world because you have to do a blitz customer acquisition phase in life of your company. So they were also thinking about various ideas in which we can do this. The market was also not ready. So that was probably, would be probably some of the problems.
If you like to hear stories of founders, then we have tons of great stories from entrepreneurs who have built billion-dollar businesses. Just search for the Founder Thesis podcast on any audio streaming app like Spotify, Gaana, Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to the show.
And then what's the next milestone? Like, how long did that money last you then? Like you integrated and you had like 4 million left with you. And
so we went with the 4 million, we were in the $50,000 a month type of mode. So we wanted to basically grow semi-organically from there and grow incrementally. We had all the $4 million in the bank and we knew that now as an organization, we're secure because now we will not die because of the money. We will have to figure out a way to grow faster, but via 100x more efficient methods. So sort of like hitting homeostasis in terms of the balance between burn and growth rate. So growing 5 to 8% month on month and finding like guerrilla methods to acquire more customers. Like what I categorically remember is that I told my demand team that I like basically will meet only enterprise companies now because we can't afford to do last mile sales, like we do SME sales. Because if we crack one chain of restaurants, that is where we should be spending all of our time on and whatever it takes. So that's where I was also spending most of my time. Travel to Bombay, stay in cheap hotels, basically. And like I have some really fun stories there. But like basically like a 2,000 rupee hotel in Bombay is not fun. It's a health risk, basically, in some ways. So I mean, we weren't poor, but we weren't in a good state, I would say. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like rags to riches because we were never in rags. I mean, we don't have such a backstory, but basically I spent a lot of time meeting these large chains. That was our strategy. Convert a large user, grow 30% for 3 months and then raise more capital, or basically keep growing like this and get to 100,000 orders a day and basically like get to substantial amount of profits. Because if you're making 10 lakh rupees per month as net contribution margin and that does not pay your payroll, it doesn't make any sense. But if you're making crore as net profit, then it's substantial to basically So to basically fund your growth efforts. So that was the thinking. That's where I met Dipinder and we have been speaking for some time. We had been speaking for some time in terms of let's figure out a way to work together, etc. Actually started with like, can you fulfill our orders? And we wanted to fulfill it, but they had an exclusivity clause that, can you be exclusive?
As in, if you sign up with them, then you have to like call off the engagement with everybody else.
Yeah, and Swiggy was one of the largest customers for us back then, and some of the key restaurant chains as well. So we couldn't afford to get rid of all that demand for something that we don't know. So we were asking for like, can we do a balance contract, which is can we do a non-exclusive, and along the way, if things go well, we can think about exclusivity. And I was saying the same thing to Swiggy as well, by the way. That let's and they were also pitching exclusivity to us that, why are you serving Zomato can you just be exclusive? And I was like, no. Let's
But
explore.
didn't Swiggy build this in-house? Like Swiggy essentially was a logistics company right from the core, right? Like, I mean, Zomato started as a discovery platform and then went into logistics. But
So Swiggy, interestingly, in the early days, they wanted to move out of logistics as well for a long time, for some time.
Yeah.
And they were like, we are thin layer. We will own logistics. 50% of our fleet, just like e-commerce, right? We will have our own logistics, but we'll also have third-party logistics. So that was their roadmap. That 50% of their demand should go through third-party logistics. And in case of Zomato, it's 100%. So that's why we were thinking that, maybe we can negotiate a better, or maybe Zomato needs us more. So why should we do exclusive, right? So those are some of the thoughts that we were going through back then. But then the synergy with Zomato was like really cool because it was A plus B or 1 plus 1 is equal to 5 in our head.
and you were still running Tiny Owl when you started having talks with Dipinder?
No, because we wanted to reduce cost and cut our burn. We're not running Tiny Owl. And there's another clause that you won't run a consumer business, by the way. That came, yeah.
Yeah, of course. We can't be competing directly, right?
You can't compete with a customer, right? So that's why, yeah.
Okay. So, like, how did that acquisition talk finally happen? Like, tell me about that. Like,
It's pretty simple, actually. I met Dipinder for getting more demand, basically. That I think we already started the pilot, and I told him that can we scale up our demand, and if we have density, the delivery times actually improve. So I remember the exact. I took the marker on the table and I was drawing this the TPH math, as we call it. That if you cross 1.7 orders an hour, your cost comes down and your efficiency improves. And at 1.7 orders an hour, getting closer to 2 essentially is when your users have a sub 30-minute delivery experience. So he said like,
what is TPH? What is the full form?
trips per hour. Yeah. So, and he said like, oh, some of these things we could do really well if we are one company. And what do you think about that? And I said, I don't think it makes sense. He said, why? And I could not answer that. So that was it. So we were having fun working with them. The team was very kicked to scale and run food delivery because Swiggy was growing really well. And in our head, we believed that we could build a very large logistics business. We believed because there's so many processes that were subscale, but we believed that the design of the process was right. So we wanted to see scale. Like as an engineer, you want your code to see scale, right? Otherwise, it doesn't, like all the effort is useless, right? Whatever money you have made, it doesn't make sense. So when it started scaling, even with a light integration, it started making sense. Yeah.
Also the integration was actually very, very smooth, even from technology perspective, because we already were very deeply integrated and working very deeply with them for their current business itself, right? So it just became an extension of the platform in some ways.
Plus, they had no in-house logistics capability at all. So, like, there was no legacy for you to deal with. You could like build it the way you wanted to.
Yeah, it was exactly
Sort of.
that. And also, of course, yeah. So there was like folks from there also joined in and like people combined hands to kind of make it a seamless single experience. And of course, things started building a lot faster. Let's say on the consumer app as well, that because it was connected, so it was all pretty easy to kind of pull off.
And was this like an all stock deal, or like was there some cash also?
There was a cash plus stock deal, like cash exit to some investors and also to us. We decided not to take the cash deal because it was actually imagine it was 2018, right? When the market was still in downturn. And our view was that with this deal, we should start making salaries because, straightforward. So that will take care of our existing spends, and maybe down the year or 2 years out, we'll take liquidity if there is an opportunity. Because we wanted to take on the upside and not on the existing value. So that was the conscious call that we took as a group. So some investors did get exit back then. Yeah.
Like you took Zomato equity, basically.
Yeah, we took Zomato ESOPs basically.
And then what? What did you build at Zomato? Like essentially, their logistics was what you were building.
We built the entire food delivery business. So not just the logistics part. We were a business within a business back then. Like food delivery was still a small business back then, and we were sort of like driving this thought process that food delivery could be extremely huge. And obviously, it was showing in the external environment as well. So we built the supply, the driver supply, the merchant supply, everything basically. Back then, we had no option. If you're building the food delivery category, you have to own it completely. You can't own one part of the supply and say that, oh, my job is done, because it actually goes hand in hand. For example, think of it like this: if you are a listings partner player, and a lot of restaurants don't deliver on your platform because they don't have their own fleet, so the restaurants are actually waiting for your fleet to happen, and only then they will partner with you, right? So what supply do you enable? How do you enable them? Right? All of those were like not only driver supply questions, but also merchant supply or extra supply questions. Yeah.
And Vatsal, you were like part of that food delivery business only, or like?
Yeah, so I think for initially 8 to 10 months, I was part of it. So of course, I was there in Gurgaon for a very long time. Started building the team in Gurgaon because I think the idea was that we of course have to shift base to Delhi, Gurgaon, and because Zomato and their team completely was out there, so there was this risk that people might not move from Bangalore to Delhi. So we had to aggressively hire for the logistics vertical as a whole and set up shop there, because of course Zomato itself had their own like challenges. They were also scaling their own business as a whole. So it was like it had to be a new team that is being set up out there, right? So we aggressively, of course, like finding people from across teams or hiring independently. So that is like the thing that we started off doing. And yeah, I think eventually what happened was I started working parallelly with Dipinder on a lot of things. Because I was there, I used to meet him a lot more often. He was like excited, and he's like, okay, so he said, okay, you lead the listing business for me from a technology standpoint. And I was there for another thing around a year, and then moved to the data platform as well. Saw a lot of like projects as a whole. Was leading the consumer apps as well for some time. Yeah, exciting, I think, time out there.
So how did Ultra Human happen?
This concludes the first part of Akshay's conversation with Mohit and Vatsal. There's a lot more that they discuss in the second part of the conversation, and you can catch that episode of the Founder Thesis podcast on any audio streaming app like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Gaana, and many more.
If you like the Founder Thesis podcast, then do check out our other shows on subjects like marketing, technology, career advice, books, and drama. Visit thepodium.in, that is thepodium.in, for a complete list of all our shows.